So where were you raised?
Houston. My mother was a concert pianist. She was a classically trained concert pianist.
Huh.
She played piano since the age of 4. My dad was in the Air Force. He was a colonel in the Air Force.
Hmm.
And they came back. They got married. They wanted to raise a family. And my mother, I mean, to be a really successful concert pianist, it's like, it's one chance in a million,
Yeah.
probably. It was really, really good. So it was a full-time job
Yeah.
raising these kids, raising 3 boys and a girl, You can
Wow.
imagine.
Yeah.
Pretty wild at times. My dad had an old ukulele that he used to fiddle around with. And we used to take a lot of home movies. And when he handed me that ukulele when I was probably around 7, that's what awakened my musical samskars
Huh.
right there. And we have a home movie. It's on DVD now of when my father handed me that ukulele. I have it on video. I can see the exact moment when my eyes went like this, and that was it. And I was into music from that point on. We listened to all the great musicians of that era, Buddy Holly and Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley, of course. And we got into that. And then that's what kind of inspired me to get into rock music. And I started playing drums really seriously, probably about 9 or 10 years old.
Wow.
That was my primary instrument for many years until I got into bass guitar. I
Yeah.
learned how to play drums really well from Ringo, and I learned how to play bass guitar from Paul McCartney. I basically memorized all their drum parts and memorized all their bass parts. Play along with the records and play it note for note. Every note Paul played, I would play. So this was an era where, groups were having like one black person, all white band, all black band with white word person. It was like,
Huh.
Sly and the Family Stone, that
Yeah.
kind of thing that
Yeah.
was going on. A lot of integration was happening in groups back in that era.
Okay.
So Allison wanted a white bass player, and this new drummer said, "Well, I know a guy. He plays really good." So, well, let's have an audition. So I auditioned, and I got the gig. So
Wow.
basically, I was a black person for about 3 years. Kind of break down those barriers that we're
Uh-huh.
all the same. It's like Swami said. Some of us are wearing white suits, some of us are wearing black suits, but we're all divine children.
Yeah.
That's it. We're all sparks of divinity, and it really helped me to see that. It was
Hmm.
really a great experience playing with that band. We were the main group for a singer named Joe Tex, who a lot of the
Uh-huh.
older folks might remember. He did a song called "Hold On to What You Got," and so we would do these package shows with BB King, where we'd meet in, say, Cincinnati. It would be us, BB King, and his band, and that's how I got to know him. And after I left that group, I was back in Houston, and BB King came to a big black nightclub in Houston, and I had a lead guitar player friend of mine who loved BB King. He was his guru. You know,
Hmm.
he was a white guy. And a lot of white lead guitar players idolized BB King. Eric
Hmm.
Clapton, George Harrison, many of them did.
Hmm.
And so I said, "Well, I know him. You want to meet him?" I said, "Yeah, yeah." I was really excited. So I went to the club and went backstage and met. BB was just, he was great. He was so gracious. He
Hmm.
was a really gracious guy. He really was. And BB said to me, "Well, look, Lewis, why don't you take your friend Michael here and take a couple of guys from my band, and why don't you all go out there and do a little warm-up set?"
Huh.
"Yeah, sure, happy to. I'll play bass." And Michael said, "Well, I didn't bring my guitar." And BB said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll let you play Lucille."
No.
That was BB's guitar. "I'll let you play Lucille." And then he went back to his dressing room. He brought out Lucille, holding it like a little child, like this. And he handed it to Michael and said, "You can play Lucille." And Michael was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to play Lucille. I'm going to play Lucille." Like this. The years that I spent playing rock music, that was my basic training to be able to build up a really solid musical skill so that
Yeah.
when I transitioned to tabla and guitar, I could do it very easily. If I hadn't spent all those years playing in those rock groups,
Yeah.
um, I wouldn't have had the foundation to be able to do what I'm doing now.
Yep.
I might be singing in the choir, but that'd be about it. I remember the first time I saw a set of tabla in a store window. I was really intrigued. Now, I wasn't into yoga back then. This is my pre-yoga days, but I was fascinated by it. And so I just had a feeling that one day I would end up playing that instrument. I didn't know where, I didn't know how, but I knew that I would probably one day play it. And that was in like 1973.
Huh.
And I came to Ananda in 1981. One of our members, Prim, bought a set of tabla when he was in India, wasn't interested. I bought them from him, and that's how I started my tabla journey.
How did you first hear about Ananda and end up coming to it?
The first time I heard about it was when I bought the Path.
Hmm.
I'd read the autobiography of a yogi in like 1977. I still have the copy, of course, it's on my altar. And then I said, God, I'm just looking for anything that I can find a book about Master. And I was in a bookstore and I found the Path in like 1978 and read it. And I remember looking at the picture, in the Path, there's that big picture of all the members at that time. And I remember looking at that picture, each individual face, and saying, I know each one of these people. I know them. I know them. I know that guy. I know that guy. I know these people. It was like I was recognizing them from past lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like Swami said, we've been together for many, many incarnations, building world brotherhood communities in the astral world and also on the physical plane as part of our salvation. Practicing Master's teachings, meditating, and helping others to become in tune with these teachings. And then when I came to Ananda and moved in, and actually moved here in May of '81, it was like we sort of picked up where we left off.
Yeah.
That's how it felt.
Wow.
All those souls that I used to see in that big wide angle photo, we just picked up where we left off. When I came to Ananda, I really thought that my musical career was pretty much done. I didn't know anything about if Swami had any kind of a music ministry, really. I didn't know anything about his music at all, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I first came in 1980 for his birthday celebration, before I moved here, actually, we had a birthday celebration up at the retreat at the Expanding Light. And he was playing his songs of Shakespeare he had just written under the big oak tree out there we used to have in the meadow. And he was so excited. I wrote 18 songs in 3 days. Woo! And he was all like, wow, And so he played him, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I was playing rock music, interesting. Uh-huh. Then I moved to Ananda Village, and I remember it was right at the point where he was sending out the first small joy singer group to tour the churches in Southern California. It was Jeannie, Agni, Lakshman. I think Deborah Golub was involved, and maybe a few others. These are souls that maybe some of the people won't even know. But anyway, they were a really, really good group. And I remember Swami was rehearsing them at the Expanding Light. He was sitting in a chair, and the group was lined up in front of him, and he was listening to them very intently. I stood behind Swami and listened to the songs. And I was really intrigued. I thought, wow, this is really interesting music. I bet one day I'm going to be playing this music. That was in about 81 or 80, about 1982. You're going to hear some cars going back and forth, because I'm right outside of, the office here, outdoors. And then I, got back into playing guitar. And then I went to Italy in 88, actually. Swami had written the festival. And I got into playing the festival with Agni. We were the two main festival players. And that kind of brought, my guitar skills back up to par, where I could really play well. But I wasn't doing any finger picking. I wasn't playing any joy singer music then at all. Just doing, the festival, playing tabla, and that was it. Moved to Italy. Swami said, we're going to put together a group to tour Germany. That was like 1990. He was doing some lectures in Germany. And so we put together about a small choir to sing a combination of the oratorio music and joy singer songs, about maybe 12 people. For 6 weeks, we toured all over Germany.
Wow. And
Agni was the choir director. Now, look, I've been the main guitar player, but I'm going to be the choir director, so you have to play guitar. So I'm going to teach you all the finger picking parts. You're going to be sing tenor and play guitar in this group. I said, okay. So he gave me lessons, and I picked it up, started practicing, bought a guitar in Italy. And that's what got me into playing guitar in small joy singer groups and singing, originally singing tenor and playing guitar. And I remember I'd been practicing, and we were rehearsing, at the retreat center there, right outside of Assisi. And I remember my debut, when we were going to rehearse with Swami. Swami was coming to all of our rehearsals. He was one of our basses. He wasn't leading the group. He was just a bass singer. And Audrey said, okay, Louis, you ready? I said, yeah. He said, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. And I was like, kind of frozen because I never done this before, But I gradually overcame my nerves. The Swami was standing right next to me, so and he was very great. He was very generous and very great, and gave me a lot of confidence. And eventually, I overcame the nerves and got into it and started to play really well, and it wasn't a problem. So that's what launched me into doing all the Joy Singer stuff.
Uh-huh.
And then from that point on, I was sort of the de facto Joy Singer, guitarist. That was Davey, who just passed by and honked your horn there. And then when I came back to America, I really got into it big time. We put together different versions of small groups, and you were with us, I think, at that time. And then I switched to bass, singing bass, and moved away from tenor. And from that point on, from like 1990 on, I was just really into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we put together the Joy Singers touring Italy in 2002. The Swami put together this group. It was myself, Bhagavati, Ramesha. Ramesha wasn't part of it then. They hadn't met yet.
Mm-hmm.
And David and Karen Gamow, Bhaktan,
Yep.
and we picked them up when we came to Assisi. And we toured Italy for about a year and a half, singing Swami's music in English and Italian, which was really an incredible experience doing that. It was really amazing.
Yeah.
And then that ended in 2004. And then I, came back to the village. So I had some interesting experiences with Swami. At one point I said, well, Swami, I wonder whether or not having a bass guitarist, on some of the Joy Singer music might be interesting. He said, well, that's interesting. So he said, well, what do you think about me giving it a try? He said, I can overdub some bass parts on, some Joy Singer material that we've already, recorded. And he said, yeah, I'm going to try it. So I borrowed a bass from Roger Hodgson of Supertramp, borrowed a bass from him, brought it back, and I overdubbed some bass parts. And Swami listened to it and said, well, it's good, but it makes it sound too country western. And it did. But yeah, you're right, Swami, it does.
How about that?
So we kind of nixed, but he was very gracious. He said, well, let's give it a try. He probably knew in the beginning it wasn't going to work, but he said, well, let's give you Lewis a chance to kind of have a little fun here.
That's sweet.
So the only other time I played bass on one of his albums was Romanian Melodies. Where I did the same thing. I got a bass from Roger, and I recorded bass along with Jack Wallace on the Romanian Melodies. So, and then we played it live in the Dome. I plugged my bass into Swami's stereo system in the Dome, and we had a bunch of us were there, and Jack and I and Casey, remember Casey who played violin, and we did a live concert, me playing bass, Jack playing piano, Casey playing violin, of Romanian Melodies in the Dome. Swami's music, reflects Master's teachings, and it carries the vibration of Master's teachings. It carries the teachings, obviously. It's all about self-realization. I did a music program where I shared Swami's music, doing all the original solo versions of all of the songs.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what I would tell the guests is that if you listen to his music, it's all about overcoming Maya, overcoming delusion, and realizing the threat of how Maya can entrap you and really, and destroy your spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
So, and his music is all about, being really wary of that and tuning into the higher teachings. I mean, you listen to, Brothers and all the other songs that he wrote. If you listen to the words carefully, that's what his music, even a song like, the Non-Blues,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of his more humorous songs, which I do. The words, are very, very intuitive and very spiritual, which is why Swami told the Joy Singers that from a certain point on, he didn't want the Joy Singers to do background doo-wops with sunglasses to the Non-Blues.
Uh-huh.
Because you miss the point of the song.
Yeah.
It becomes too much entertainment, and the spiritual message of the song is lost. And I could really say, yeah, he's right, because it does carry a very important spiritual message.
Mm-hmm.
All of his humorous music does, including the instrumental music. It's got a very powerful spiritual vibration of Master's teachings, Master's vibration, and being really careful about Maya, about how it can catch you and grab you. He said that rock music is the ego beat. It really emphasizes the ego.
Okay.
And I played it for years, and I could see he was right. Because when you watch people listening to rock music, the ego is centered in the medulla.
Hmm.
That's the center of the ego. And you watch them doing this, going, hey man, like that. It really emphasizes and reinforces the ego.
Uh-huh.
Scott, he's right. And so I thought, wow, Swami's music, of course, doesn't do that. It brings your consciousness up to the higher chakras.
Yeah.
So I would just, and he warned us, he said, look, I'm not going to tell you not to listen to rock music. It's up to you. And I'll be honest with you, I still occasionally do, because
Uh-huh.
I just enjoy it. But just be aware of the influence that rock music has on the chakras. It reinforces the lower chakras, and it also reinforces the chakra of the ego, the medulla oblongata.
Okay.
Just be conscious of it. That's
Yep.
all. Just be conscious of it.
All right, my friend. Way fun. Thanks a
Okay.
lot.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.